Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea. James Bond is the coolest guy, part 2.
We dive into the performances by Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan, and Daniel Craig as 007 and discuss which one of them did Bond best.
Later, we investigate how the film franchise has reflected its time, from the swingin' 60s to the campy, action-packed 90s to the gritty realism of the 2010s.
Finally, we put on our producer caps and offer unsolicited advice for the upcoming Bond reboot.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the Solons.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, buddy. Last week we went deep into the books by Ian Fleming, and this week we are going to be tackling the films and the 3 actors who matter.
But more than 3 actors have played Bond.
Yes, with my apologies to Roger Moore, George Lazenby, and Timothy Dalton.
That's it.
They, have turned in. I saw Roger Moore, I believe, in The Spy Who Loved Me, and he's quite good in it, but they don't have quite the juice. Connery is so, associated with the role, of course. Brosnan, I think, took it to a stratospheric level of being like, ooh, this is a big, big franchise now. This can hang with any of them. And then Daniel Craig, I think, also did a phenomenal job with the performance.
So we're going to go chronologically then, start with Connery,
Yes.
middle course of Brosnan, and then a little dessert of Craig. That's the idea here.
That is it. An ice-cold sorbet, I guess. A lemon sorbet for Craig. But before we dive in to the actors, I think something that's interesting about all of these movies is that they sort of take on the era that they come from.
Yes.
And so the 60s, when these movies happen, are very much in the feel of the James Bond world. James Bond is this sort of throwback, regressive character, but he does fit well into the 60s, doesn't he?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, he's a little regressive and old-fashioned. There's almost this kind of 50s nature to him. So when he exists in the 60s, he's often up against like free love and sort of the changing times, and it kind of reminds me of like Don Draper in Mad Men. Sort of as the world around him is changing, this central figure kind of stays unchanged. So I think it's kind of a nice backdrop for him by contrast versus by fit.
I think that's a great way to put it. And I think these spy movies, I think they've had, especially the James Bond, have had such lasting power because they used to be very popular books. And, I discussed the books. They're very enjoyable books, but quite frankly, the books don't really hold a candle to the movies. For instance, I can describe Monaco to the T, but there's nothing quite like just setting a high definition camera and filming Monaco. This story is very much more suited to a visual medium.
Yeah, the best parts of the James Bond movies are just, like you said, you get to go to Monaco, you get to go to Dubai, you get to go to Japan, you get to go all over the world on these different missions. It's really the escapism that as an audience member you love with these James Bond movies. You get to go with them jet setting all over the world.
Yeah, it's in a way, it's somewhat like Star Wars. Star Wars was inspired by space operas, which were a very famous pulp style of novel, and now they're basically defunct because we just decided that it's better to see it visually. Same sort of idea with these films, which were pretty popular immediately. Largely, I would say, on the back of one Sean Connery, the absolute original. Do you know the story of Sean Connery in his auditions?
Tell me.
So originally, he thought Alfred Broccoli, the producer, thought he blew his audition. He showed up in very 60s attire, like something you'd wear to a pub, like just brown pants, a shirt with an open collar, no tie. He was wearing a hat, like all of these things. And they're just like, I'm not sure he's the right guy. But Broccoli and his wife had seen Sean Connery at a party, and they're like, I think that is the guy. I think that's the guy. So he shows up to his audition, and it's kind of tense, though. So it's like, we really want you, but it seems like you're sort of wrong. And eventually, Connery's just sort of had enough, and he says, you either take me as I am or not at all. And he storms out of the room, and they're like blown back by this a bit, and they watch him cross the street to his car, and they describe him very famously as walking like a panther. And it's just this looseness, these long limbs, this swagger, this confidence, this inherent power, coiled and ready to spring. And once they saw him storm out of there, they're like, we got our guy. And so that is how Sean Connery got the role. There's famous stories about him sort of sleeping in these Savile Row suits to seem as comfortable in them, because this was not the type of guy that Sean Connery was, which I think makes him all the more perfect as Bond. You can kind of feel that working class Navy background sort of guy in Sean Connery.
He really deftly balances intensity with ease. He wears the suit, those sort of long limbs, and the way he moves. There is this like just ease and relaxation, but then in his face and eyes, and particularly in his scenes with female characters and these kind of charged love scenes, there's this intensity, and he's just so fucking handsome. I mean, like, he's so good looking, right? And timelessly so. So I think, just all those elements added together are really what make him a definitive Bond.
It is funny that we think of how handsome he is, because Connery is a man who was balding, and he wore a toupee for every single performance as James Bond.
Yeah, what episode did we discuss this in when we were talking about Connery wearing a toupee?
It was hair loss and weight gain.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So he was basically unknown when he was cast, which I think is important for a character or for an actor when they take on the role of Bond. Because Bond, unlike many other characters, maybe even unlike Batman, the character is much more important than the actor.
For sure.
When you are the actor as James Bond, you become James Bond in the public's eye in a way where Christian Bale was Batman, but he's also Bruce Wayne. James Bond is always James Bond. He never turns it off. And so you, as the person who plays James Bond, you just kind of inherit this mantle of him. And whoever you were before is sort of like slogged away like an old skin on a snake.
It seemed to really hit a breaking point kind of in the late 2010s, early 2020s with Daniel Craig, who, I think after he made Spectre did not want to return for the final Bond film, and it just seemingly was so frustrated. I think, you're a young, hungry actor, you get the dream role, it's awesome for the first movie, it's awesome for the second movie. Maybe by the third or fourth you're starting to get kind of annoyed of it, and then by the fifth you're in outright rebellion, and then you spend the rest of your career kind of trying to distance yourself from the fact that you ever played the character. But it's like, hey, guess what the first line in your obituary is going to be, right?
Yeah.
It just is. It's not that it's like a deal with the devil, but it's basically like when you sign on to play this iconic character, it's like a marriage. It's like you're always going to be married to James Bond. Christian Bale, you're always going to be married to Batman.
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
It's almost like you become a secret agent. Like you leave your past behind and you take on this cover story of you being Bond. But I think Connery, even though he was an unknown, he sort of bends Bond to him.
Yes.
He is not the truest Bond, in my opinion, but he is such a big movie star in a way that is reminiscent of John Wayne, of a Humphrey Bogart, just this classic masculinity. You mentioned it, the intensity in the eyes that really just lights a spark in any scene that he's with another woman. And I think he pairs this with Harrison Ford's ability to sell ridiculous dialogue.
Yes,
Like
yes.
the Bond universe deals in a lot of ridiculousness, and there's a lot of kooky character names, and the mission that he goes on are sort of bizarre, and he's got these goofy gadgets and all this sort of stuff. So you need somebody who's going to have a bit of fun with it, but also imbue it with a seriousness that will
Yeah.
make you take it seriously as an audience.
You're in character and you're believable, even though the lines are ridiculous. But as you're delivering them, there's the slightest wink to the audience. There's the slightest, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know I'm in a movie. But yeah, it just works. I think the Harrison Ford as Han Solo comparison is totally perfect. It's just like iconic characters having to deliver somewhat cheesy lines and looking great doing it.
Yeah, and it's like the movies don't work without him doing that.
Yeah.
Fleming originally opposed Connery's casting, calling him a stunt man, which I think is funny, but he changes his mind completely after watching the first one, Dr. No, and he's just like, you're right, this guy's got it. Maybe he isn't true to the character that I put in the book, but in the film version, this guy works flawlessly. And he even sort of molds Bond a bit as he's writing the books later on to Connery, most famously declaring that Bond is Scottish based on Connery, which I think is sort of a funny touch for Bond.
Yeah, I think it's a cool touch. I just thought of here's my impression. Ready? Here's my impression of Sean Connery reading Ian Fleming's comment about him in the newspaper the next day. Ready? Stuntman. I like that.
It's a good micro impression. Yeah,
That's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's gotten to a Connery impression.
Yeah,
so
I
that's
don't know. That seems like pretty fresh territory. Does anyone do that one? I've been working on a walk-in, but I'll save that. I don't know if anyone's done that one. Yeah.
I really though think that Connery and the strength of his performance is the cornerstone upon which this entire franchise is built. I mean, he's really the proof of concept, makes it clear that this could work, and in my opinion, his movies are really great. Like, some of them are a little bit goofy.
Yeah.
The Bond franchise in general is somewhat hit or miss.
Yes, it's kind of like an every other one. I remember, Dr. No being good, From Russia with Love is really good. But it's so funny, what you mentioned with Connery's kind of the reason James Bond succeeded. I think you can kind of, with any great franchise, point to sort of one guy, and it's either the main actor or the filmmaker. Like with the Batman movies, I think you probably credit it to Tim Burton, right? Tim Burton kind of created the Gotham world, or the Lord of the Rings. It's Peter Jackson, right? You could point to individual performances and stuff, but at the end of the day, you kind of just got one guy who deserves the credit, and certainly for Bond, it's Connery.
Yeah, the other one that I would mention would be Goldfinger is excellent.
Great.
So
Great.
that's one to go for. Okay, so there was a sort of interim period. Connery, after playing the role several times, was the first guy to grow weary of being James Bond and sort of played footsie with the character. It's like, am I gonna be him again? Am I not? Eventually, they replace him a couple of times. Connery also, starts gaining weight. Like, you gotta have a bit of a hunger to you, I think, to play James
It's
Bond.
just so funny because we're spending now years talking about who's going to be the next James Bond, only for them to be cast and like doing the first movie and like doing the second movie, only to play footsie with the third, fourth, and fifth movie. Like, all these guys, with the exception of, who was it, Lazenby, and I think maybe Dalton only did a couple. Like, most of these guys do a minimum of 4 movies, and there is always, by the end of the movie, there's just this like, I'm totally tired of it. I've grown weary of it. It's just so hilarious. Dude.
Yeah. All right. So the next one that I think matters, and I think he is, if James Bond were a real person, like if James Bond was an actual guy.
You mean like the book James Bond, or just
if
as a
no.
character?
If James Bond lived, like if
Okay,
James Bond was an actual man, and then they wrote down the stories of his life, and then they made those stories into a movie, Pierce Brosnan would be hired as the actor to play James Bond.
Yes.
He looks like a movie star version of a normal, more normal looking guy.
Well, they say he looks-wise is the closest to how Bond is described in the book. Do you think that's accurate?
With the dark hair, yes. I don't know about his rich, full head of hair, and I think he's more handsome than Bond would be. I think because when you see Pierce Brosnan, you're like, holy cow, who is that guy? Whereas Bond needs to be like, that's a good-looking guy. I've forgotten your face already. Like, Pierce Brosnan is arguably the best looking man to ever live.
Connery more handsome, Brosnan more sexy. Is that what? Or what
I
how
would
would you
reverse it.
Reverse it. Oh, interesting.
Connery
Okay.
has this animal magnetism about him that is very like sexy, whereas Brosnan is,
He is,
catalog
yeah.
handsome,
He is stunningly
borderline
handsome.
pretty.
Yes.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
And so, kind of an interesting story for him as well in terms of his casting. So Alfred Broccoli spots him in 1987, which is well before he took on the role. Because Brosnan's wife, Cassandra Harris, was in For Your Eyes Only. Yeah, so kind of an interesting
Was
tie
that like
in there.
maybe you don't know. Was that a Roger Moore one or a Dalton or Lazenby, or do you know which one of them it was as you type it into Google it? And I'm just
keep
stalling
vamping,
for
keep
time,
vamping. It was a
stalling.
Roger Moore. Roger Moore did
Now
quite a
Roger
few
Moore
of
is
them.
funny. I've seen a photo of Roger Moore. I've never seen one of the movies, but he looks very old. He seems like he
Yes.
falls outside of the 35 to 42, or maybe he was just a product of those
I think it's-
smoke and hard drinking 70s.
I would say if Pierce Brosnan is what James Bond would look like if you were to cast him in a movie, Roger Moore kind of looks close to like what James Bond would look like in real life. A little bit more schlubby, not the greatest skin, like still a good looking man and very debonair and very, British and suave and all the things that you'd want him to be, but doesn't leap off in my opinion as much the way that Brosnan does. Even if I would say some of Brosnan's movies are maybe some of the weaker in the bunch. Anyway, Brosnan couldn't take on the role immediately because he had TV commitments. Do you know of the name of the TV show that that Pierce Brosnan was stuck on that they wouldn't let him be James Bond?
Is it well known or no?
No chance you get it.
I don't know.
It's a ludicrous name.
Blah 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 blah.
It's Remington Steele.
What the hell is that?
It is a female private investigator who's very good at her job, isn't getting taken seriously because she's a woman. So she invents this male character, Remington Steele,
I love it.
who Brosnan plays.
Wait. So what is that? She invents.
She invents the character, and then Brosnan is like, I think she invents it in fiction, and then she eventually needs somebody to play Remington
hires
Steele.
an actor
She
or
gets, she gets
something,
him, and he plays
I
it.
like that title
Yeah.
and premise. Oh hell, good. It kept him out of Bond. So there's an idea that good. It's on par with James Bond.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah, so eventually the Bond steps aside. I think it might have been Roger Dalton at this point.
Well,
Or,
there
sorry,
was no
I'm mixing
Roger
it up. What's
Dalton.
his name?
It's hard to read.
Roger
off,
Moore.
It's hard to read off the outline, type, and talk at once.
Sorry.
Isn't it?
So those time out with Roger Moore stepping aside, and it's like, all right, you're in, Brosnan. Extremely suave, handsome, full head of hair, the best looks, perfect in the tuxedo. I think he looks the
Yes.
best in the
Best in the
tuxedo.
tux, 100% agreed. Best
Never
in the
gets
tux.
really dirty or rustled. He's the cleanest Bond. I would
That
say.
was kind of a hallmark of all the Bond movies until Craig. He never
Yes.
gets the tuxedo dirty. He never breaks a sweat. He's running and jet setting all over the world. Craig, those movies were the first time. But yeah, the Brosnan was kind of a modern take on the classics, whereas Craig, they've kind of reinvented the wheel a bit.
Yes. In contrast to Connery, who has a bit more back and forth, bantery type lines with both the bad guys and the ladies, Brosnan, and he has, he puts his whole Connery sort of spin on all the lines. Brosnan plays the character very understated, very straight ahead, and kind of blends in a bit more. Even though he's, so handsome, he kind of acts the way you would expect Bond to act a bit
Yes,
more.
my critique would be I think the understated choice is very good. It's kind of a natural reaction to the cheesiness of the lines. A good choice for the performance. However, I think his dialogue is the cheesiest of any of the Bonds,
Yeah.
right? He gets stuck with the cheesiest lines.
Lots of one-liners.
Yeah, and and that was just that era, right? That sort of 90s sitcom-y,
Schwarzenegger.
yeah, just post Schwarzenegger, post Stallone era. And Yeah, I think like understated. It was almost just self-preservation to get through those really schlocky lines.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, he has to sort of take it seriously so that you buy these
Right.
ever increasingly campy movies. And I think his era really neatly fits alongside the Burton to Shoemaker Batmans.
Yes.
Whereas they sort of start pretty strong with GoldenEye, and then I also saw Tomorrow Never Dies, which is also quite good. And then it gets a little bit campier and campier. Just in the same way that the Batman movies, they have some good ones. They have some ones that feel a little more grounded and serious. And then by the end of it, it's kind of just a total farce, which kind of casts a stink over everything that came before. But if you watch them without sort of that cultural context, I think they can be pretty fun. For instance, in Tomorrow Never Dies, I'm going to give you the opening scene. James Bond has to infiltrate a deal among terrorists for a nuclear bomb, okay? And so what's happening is they're monitoring this from a naval warship. They're like, oh, there's all these weapons. Let's take out all the bad guys in one go. So they fire off these missiles from the warships, not realizing that there's nukes there. So Bond has to steal an F-22 with the nukes on it and then dodge the naval missiles that are flying at him, as well as the terrorists who also get in their F-22s and they're shooting at him. So that's kind of the feel of the Brosnan James Bond.
Yeah, sort of small budget indie movie type approach.
Yeah. But it's kind of, they're poking fun at it, but I do think that is when this Bond became sort of big business, like multi-$100 million budgets.
That
We're no
was-
longer doing it campy and silly.
Very maximalist, right? Very maximalist.
And speaking of that, this is kind of the era where being a Bond girl, I think, really, really gains that cultural cachet.
Yes.
Just to name a few of the Bond girls of the Brosnan era.
Can I hit a couple
Please.
before you? Michelle Yeoh.
Yes, who is phenomenal.
Halle Berry.
Yep.
Terry Hatcher.
Yes.
I'm tapped. What else?
Rosamund Pike.
Yeah.
And Denise Richards,
Yeah,
who plays a
that's right.
nuclear scientist, I believe.
Sure.
Yeah. So they are very fun films. And the probably most lasting influence, actually, of them, I think, is the video game GoldenEye.
100%.
That, is one of the biggest all-time first-person shooters. Almost invents the genre of it. And so, I think that is something that you can really say for it, that it, led Bond into this next era and then also sort of showcased its crossover appeal and gave us a new way of experiencing what it's like to be James Bond.
I agree. Just that 90s era of consumerism, and to your point, like more merchandising, crossover into video games. There were obviously already the books. I think you're totally right. It was kind of the first time Bond was brought into the modern age.
Yeah, and as a guy who likes video games and James Bond, I wouldn't mind a really well done James Bond video game. I think it's been a while.
Oh, dude, it'd be awesome. I think there's such an issue with the Broccoli family having owned the film and all the rights, and now that MGM and Amazon owns it, maybe you'll see some more farming out of the IP.
You think Amazon might loosen up the restrictions around a famously highly guarded piece of intellectual property?
I could see that happening, yes.
All right. Well, let's dig into the gritty, dirty Daniel Craig portrayal of Bond right after the break. All right, now we get into, and I would say this is my personal favorite James Bond, just because he came up in the age when I was a young man. And I think when whoever is James Bond, when you're sort of a young teenager into adulthood, that's your James Bond.
For
Of
sure.
course, I am talking of Daniel Craig.
Are we really going to go 2 weeks with these Bond episodes and not come back from break with a da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? Like, are we, come on, seriously?
There's still one more break to go.
I
buddy.
should have saved that bullet in my chain.
Yeah, well, we'll look forward to the callback. So other than his blonde hair, though, I would say Daniel Craig, to me, is the truest Bond. He acts and looks the closest to what I imagine Bond to be like, and as he is described in the books to me. The clinching feature that is said about James Bond in his books constantly is that he has cruel features.
Yes.
And Daniel Craig has cruel features.
Yeah, his demeanor too is just that of a cruel Brit prick, as we
Yes.
said on last week's episode. He just, he just has such a hard, rough exterior, particularly after Casino Royale, the death of his lady, and it makes him at times hard to root for. But yes, he's a very, very watchable, captivating, believable Bond.
Particularly those blue eyes and his sort of realistic edge. You know, this is a guy, his suit gets dirty. You can see the sadness creeping in that is a feature of the Bond in the book. There's this melancholy to Daniel Craig that simmers under the surface in a good way. There's the joyless drinking, the brutal violence that I think, I would even argue that at times is maybe pushed a little further maybe than it needs to be, the gritty realism of the James Bond era, but I think it was a necessary box to check and very much of its era. It perfectly fits into the sort of 2010s sort of zeitgeist, if you will.
Yeah, even though the Casino Royale is 06 and the latest one was 2021, like the Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale, they felt kind of postmodern, and then Spectre is obviously Skyfall, very 2010s,
Yes.
and then No Time to Die did not feel 2020s; it felt 2010s, right?
Yes.
So it is a very 2010s era movie franchise, even if some of the movies fall outside of that decade.
Absolutely. So we've given the backstory of all the other guys taking on the role. Here's Craig's. He was originally hesitant to take it on because obviously he knew the history. You basically have to give up your entire career. You just become Bond, your entire identity for that matter. But then he reads Casino Royale. And Casino Royale, I think, inarguably is the best Bond script.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like,
for sure.
The
Yeah, for
story,
sure.
where you go, everything. I mean, I think it's the best in the series.
I
And-
also think probably for me as a top 3 to 5 action movie I've ever seen in my entire life. I just think it's so unbelievably watchable, such a great villain. There really aren't that many flaws. His performance is incredible. The movie has tremendous heart. You maybe could argue it's a little overstuffed. Basically every Craig movie I think is guilty of that.
Yeah.
But it's just terrific.
Gets a bit gruesomely violent with Mads Mikkelsen at
Whipping
the
his
end.
nuts, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
but the poker scene, I mean, it really just capitalized on that Texas Hold'em being white hot at that era. It was 2006 is when it came out, which is when Texas Hold'em was on ESPN all the time, the World Series of Poker, stuff like that.
You mentioned kind of the hyper violence of these movies. Bond movies are like PG-13 fare, right? The Brosnan ones I think were PG-13. I think even all the Craig ones are PG-13. But they do skew a little more R-rated with the Craig ones. Like there should be a little more fun with them. That is what I would maybe critique. And it's the thing you can critique maybe with some of the Nolan Batman films is they're a little too dark, right? They're very 2010s in that sense, even though again, some of those movies were before the 2010s. There is that kind of like darkness, that grittiness, that realism that is enjoyable and is believable and feels very modern. But when you go back to rewatch it, you kind of just wish they were a little more fun.
Yeah, I think it was a reaction against how much hope the country had under Obama. And as a result, our artistic tastes were like, we need something with more edge, with more bitterness.
Right.
And
Things
things
are
like
too
that.
good.
Yeah.
Let's be more gritty and bitter. Yeah.
Totally. Like, I have seen Daniel Craig realistically strangle too many guys. Like, I don't need it to take the exact amount of
Yes.
time and make the
Yeah.
exact same noises that it would take if you were to actually strangle somebody.
That's true.
And then, of course, I think the other part of that movie that is so fantastic is Eva Green, which is just the best Bond Bond chemistry. There's that scene where they're on the train together. I mean, it is
crackling.
And
yes.
she also plays the one woman Bond ever loves, the woman he marries, who is killed by a bad guy. And I think that really she fills that role beautifully.
There is a stunning button line in the train scene where they're going back and forth. And Bond says to her something like, "Besides, you're not my type." And she says, "Smart." And he says, "Single."
Yes.
Like there's just so many killer
Yes.
repartee lines between them.
Absolutely. Although I will say her role is so good and her performance is so good in the character she plays, almost casts this shadow over every other woman who enters these movies. They just kind of can't live up to her. And then they're also always referencing her, which is a little much in my opinion as well.
It's the Heath Ledger Joker problem. It's you peak too soon, it casts a shadow. It's a blessing and a curse for a franchise.
Yes, and I think as the Batman of Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher shaped the 90s Brosnan Bonds, these movies, these Craig Bonds, are very much a reaction to the Jason Bourne movies. I think the Jason Bourne movies really changed what we expected from spy movies.
Yeah.
Super realistic, super like handheld camera, really intricate action choreography, super crash intensive car chases. You know, whatever car Bond drives now really gets dented up. He's slamming it into, you know, old city walls and against parked cars and stuff like that. Right. So there's definitely a bit more of sort of stakes and feeling of this texture, this realistic texture that goes along with it.
This, too, is just a trope of kind of the aging star in the franchise. You see this a lot with, you know, now that it's ended, the Mission Impossible movies, as Cruise got older and older, and same thing with Craig in the Bond movies getting older and older. We as the audience or the filmmakers feel like we need to see all the hits he's taken, and these hits really take a toll on him because he's older and he's been living this life a long time. So that's really something they kind of lean into, I think, to kind of build sympathy with the audience, because you're an older person watching that movie and you're like, oh man, like, you know, I threw out my back the other day and it really hurt. And I can relate to Bond getting socked in the ribs by a henchman. You know, it's like this weird kinship as an audience member you feel with him.
Right. Well, Craig also is 15 years as Bond.
Yeah.
Like, so you got to sort of acknowledge that, like, yeah, he's gotten older. He's gotten older.
Is it kind of like 32 to 47, probably?
Something like
right?
in
'Cause
that,
I think
yeah.
he's maybe in his early 50s now,
Yeah.
and the last Bomb's a few years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think in addition to the Bourne movies, it's also sort of a reaction with Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. And I think they sort of suffer from the same problems as the trilogy goes along. Is just there's too much going on and we sort of lose the plot a bit. Like Nolan, the third one, The Dark Knight Rises, while great, there's just so many side characters and so many like different threads that you got to sort of keep in your head. And it's so hard to make a great movie when there's lots of different threads, because something's going to be the weak point of the film. And like I would say, for instance, in The Dark Knight Rises, the Marion Cotillard performance is just a little bit not of a piece with the rest of it. And sort of in the last one, No Time to Die, the Rami Malek performance, I think, is a little bit of a false note as well.
I think even, you know, with any of these franchise runs with one guy at the center of them, there's kind of always just going to be one movie you rewatch. With the Nolan trilogy, everyone just rewatches The Dark Knight. Like, maybe you've seen Batman Begins multiple times and Dark Knight Rises multiple times, but if you're rewatching one of them, it's The Dark Knight. Same thing with the Bond movies. You're going to rewatch Casino Royale. Occasionally, you'll probably kick in Skyfall. Maybe you'll do Casino Royale every 3 years, Skyfall every 5, whatever the case may be. But you're really lucky if you get one or even two from a run of 5 movies that you rewatch.
Yeah, and I think like whereas Bale is the sort of the perfect age in The Dark Knight, Craig is the perfect age in like Casino Royale, and maybe a touch in Skyfall where we get a taste of the old Bond, which is sort of a fun take on the character, which isn't really something they had done before. But it's pretty funny. You know, he's getting creaky. That hairline really starts going back. He gets called old man. And we love the old guys still got it trope, don't we?
Yes. That is something we talked about in our Batman episode. There is something, it's like you see with LeBron now as the aging athlete. There is such a romanticism to, the old guys still got it.
That's right. And I think that the problem with these movies as they went along is they just get too long. They've gotten bloated. And I think Bond movies should be tight. Like my perfect Bond movie is a touch under 2 hours.
Under.
I
Wow.
want to be kind of in and out. You know, these are fun afternoon things. I shouldn't have to, want to stop the movie halfway through to get a snack. It should all just kind of go down in one cold shot.
I'd like 205, 207.
205.
I kind of want it a little over 2 hours, but it should not be over 210.
Yeah, well, I think that's the problem is that these movies are so popular that occasionally other things kind of get in the way. It's like, well, we've had this side character from the last movie, and, well, this guy's still under contract, so let's get him into this movie. Or, oh, we had that villain from the other movie, but we didn't kill him. We just put him in jail. Let's have a scene with him as well. Or, ooh, we've got some starlet that we'd really like to make a Bond girl. Let's give her a quick little scene. And, the more that you build this horse by committee, the more you end up with a camel. Yeah, so I think that's where it ended up.
Yeah, it just gets too overstuffed, and the more the movies go on, the more you have to do these callbacks and flashbacks and incorporate characters, and it's best to just kind of do a trilogy, get in, get out.
And speaking of getting in, getting out, we'll talk about the next phase of the James Bond franchise right after this break.
Talking about. Wait a minute.
Oh boy, sorry, Will Slade, if that fried the vocals there. All right, so you and me, Jim, we're M, and we're calling in 007, aka Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve. He's 007. We're calling him into our office, and we're giving him a new assignment here as he's taking over the franchise, and we're gonna give him, what we think the next Bond phase should sort of have. We'll sort of bounce some ideas off him. But I believe before we get into how DV, as I'm going to be calling him, does his take on the series, what do you make of his sort of prior filmography?
I like him, don't love him. I really do admire the craft of his films, to name a few. The Dune franchise, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, Prisoners. I really admire his craft, and I think he's a really gifted filmmaker. I will say his movies leave me very cold. I've never really been emotionally swept up in any of his movies. I admire him from a technical perspective. I think story-wise, there's some over-explaining. I think his movies are a little overstuffed, but they often leave me cold. And, normally this would be a bad thing. However, like we said, Bond is a cruel-featured Brit prick, and perhaps his movies should leave you a little cold. Maybe they should be impressive from a technical perspective, but maybe leave you a little cold. So we'll see. I'm a little worried. He's a very gifted filmmaker. I think he'll do a great job. They talked about possibly having Christopher Nolan. I think it's kind of cool he's not doing it because it opens him up to make more interesting, and diverse films. I think Denis Villeneuve is a good guy to choose for it. But we'll see. I've probably seen like 15 hours worth of his movies, and there's maybe 3 chuckles among them. So we'll see. Bond to me should be kind of funny, like Batman movies. So we'll see. I'm a little worried they're going to be a little too dark and emotionally detached.
to give a few positives for him, I agree with everything that you just said. He is definitely very comfortable with a huge budget franchise. He really is great at visuals, set design, cinematography, which I think are very important parts about a Bond film. And he does have this sort of realistic, gritty vision with also a bit of fantasticalness about it.
All agreed, but we've kind of just seen this with the Craig franchise. My fear is we're kind of just going to do somewhat of a rehash of the Craig franchise just with a hot, young, new Craig, which is so hard because Craig is so hot even as an old man. So that is my one hesitation. Again, he's a very gifted filmmaker. He's unbelievably gifted. I'm just a little worried the movies aren't going to be as fun as I'm hoping they'd be.
I think, to your point, if I were to give him some advice, where I would aim for between Brosnan and Craig.
Ding, ding, ding.
Loosen up the tie a little bit.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit more campiness. These should be fun thrill rides, not too bogged down with, James Bond's past or his trauma or needing to get, every kill anatomically correct.
And I think another issue with some of these modern movies is you don't want to appear too regressive in your approach to the female characters. And that's understandable. You don't want the female characters just to be something that Bond and the audience are ogling at. At the same time, though, sexual tension and, these sort of titillating scenes are part of what make James Bond such a great franchise. So you want to balance these kind of strong female characters with, we still want to see some sexual tension and we want some sexiness in these movies, right? And you can have that with Bond too, lean into the guy for that as well. Don't put it all on the lady. Have the guy, lift some of that load as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, these two things kind of go hand in hand in Bond. There's competence and there's sexiness hand in hand. You don't have to be choosing one or the other.
Yeah.
Another point that we've sort of made is that I think they need to be shorter, and I think you don't necessarily want a name actor for Bond, but you do, I think, need a name actor for the villain.
Yes, I agree with that. However, if you want it to be a shorter movie, we maybe got to go with a different director. Did you see Blade Runner 2049? I still haven't finished it. I started it in 2017. But yeah, I do agree with you. I do think there was this weird tendency with the Craig Bond movies. Oh, Christoph Waltz is super popular. Let's make him the villain. Rami Malek just won an Oscar for playing Freddie Mercury. Make him the villain. There was just this, and like Mads Mikkelsen's kind of the only good villain, and he was just kind of like a workman-like European actor. So you have to find someone who just really is gifted, is not necessarily a flash in the pan, super, super popular in 2026. Let's cast them now, and then when the movie comes out 3 years later, they're not as popular, right? I think that is such a kind of desperate trend we've seen from some of these franchises. Do you have some names in mind of kind of villains you'd like to see?
I do. Before I say this, I'm going to hearken back to Al Pacino's scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, it's on the front of everyone's mind.
Yes. What he tells Rick Dalton in this time is Rick Dalton is a former leading man that is being bopped around all of these different sitcoms as the heavy, the villain, for their main character, their leading man, to defeat. And so when they see their leading character defeat Rick Dalton, they're seeing them whip the character that Dalton used to play. So he used to play a badass. Now our badass is beating up this badass. Our badass must be very badass. To that point, I think let's get somebody who's been a real badass in the past, and let's have our new guy, let's put him over, in a wrestling term, by having him take this guy down. So my first guy that I was thinking, Christian Bale.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, super cool. I think he plays a villain in one of the Thor movies, like one of the Taika Waititi. I don't know that the movie went over very well. Christian Bale's one of the most gifted actors around today. I would love to see him as a villain. I think it's really cool, especially now that he's kind of aged out of leading man territory. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful suggestion.
A sort of bizarre-looking guy, too,
for sure.
As handsome as he is.
He can look villainous.
Yes.
And he's played some, in The Fighter, he played plays kind of a morally ambiguous character. And
American Psycho,
American
of course.
Psycho Batman. He's really had a great body of work. Millions of movies outside of those as well. Millions, I said, not hyperbolic at all, was that?
Here's another one for you. Cranston.
Bryan Cranston, Walter White.
Yeah,
You want
yeah.
Heisenberg
Right.
as the next Bond villain. I
Right.
think it's great. I love the idea of an American Bond villain. Usually they're so desperate to be xenophobic and have a foreign character be the villain. But I like the idea of an American Bond villain. I think Cranston, again, the performance as Walter White is one of the greatest acting performances you'll see in any medium of any character, and I think he would be really terrific in this type of movie. Getting up there, though. I think he's close to 70, so
Yeah.
tick-tock.
He'd have to be a bit of a mastermind sort of figure.
Yes,
Here's my biggest swing out of left field.
Okay.
The Rock.
Oh, no, I can't do that
Can't
one.
sign off.
I can't do the smashing machine versus Bond. I can't do that.
All
I
right, fair
can't do
enough.
that.
To that point, we need to keep the villain's plan simple.
Yes.
Simple.
Yes.
These big budget action movies, particularly the Mission Impossible franchise and some of these later Bonds, they get bogged down by over explaining the villain's plan. It's too much. Make it simple, please.
Yes, I want to blow up the world. I want all the world's money.
Yeah.
Simple, rock dumb,
Yeah.
right? Like rock dumb kids and audience members are going in there. Make it easy for us. Make it easy.
Don't overthink it. My pitch, it's a billionaire. He's on an island. He develops nukes. He's holding the world hostage into giving them money. There you go.
Beautiful.
That's all you need to do.
Beautiful. I
All
love
right.
it.
Now, probably the most important question to ask is who to cast as James Bond.
Hmm.
Reports have put Callum Turner as the apparent front runner.
This is our producer Will is a fan of him. What's the show you like him? Masters of the Air. He's apparently very good, and he is probably best known for dating Dua Lipa, or as they say in Britain, Dua Lipa. That's kind of a Cockney accent, isn't it?
Yeah, really gutter Cockney.
I mean, have you seen him in anything?
I have never seen him act in anything, but I know who he is. Therefore, he is perfect to play James Bond.
He has those cruel features. He looks very British. He's got, a gal who would play a great Bond girl in Dua Lipa. She's got a British accent.
Oh.
I think she could at least do the song, right? Couldn't she at least do the Bond song?
I think you sign her up to do the song. You sign her up to do the opening scene. Where Bond's on vacation with a
yes.
girl and then he leaves her. That's perfect.
That's
yes.
good. I like that.
He's
Yeah,
got
yeah.
the high hairline, so I'm a fan of him. Looks good in a tuxedo. He's been in some big budget stuff. He was in that Fantastics Beasts franchise, and he was one of the boys in the boat. This is the type of stuff that you should be. You should be a guy
Yes.
who's been sort of in the
Peripheral.
background.
Yes.
Time to step forward. I think it's that. And then to the point that you made, he is Dua Lipa's boyfriend. So even though you wouldn't say he's like, not Brosnan level handsome, still a good looking guy, and certainly must possess some ineffable something if he's got the top pop star on his arm.
I mean,
there.
she's one of the most beautiful women in the world. If you put Dua Lipa in a time machine and put her back like in the 1920s and showed her to like a farmer from the 20s, immediate heart attack.
Yeah, I
death.
dropped
like
dead.
just would have no conception that a woman could be that beautiful.
Yes. I think another piece of advice that I would offer to DV would be make this a real fresh start for the series, and it's a fresh start for the series. Do not be afraid to leave a little on the table. We don't need to do everything
Right.
all in this one movie.
Yeah.
There's going to be a few. The main thing we need to do is we need to go somewhere we haven't gone before, which is a difficult task for Bond, but there's a lot of jaw-droppingly stunning places all around the world.
Now, they've adapted every single book. They've written, I think the last 2 or 3 have been originals, right? There are some Bond kind of short stories in addition to the novels, is my understanding. Do you know if the plan moving forward is to it's just to keep writing original scripts? I don't think it's to rehash or redo any of the novel. That's all done, right?
I think those are done.
At least for now,
yeah.
right? Maybe in 50 years they'll start doing them again. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Right. I think I think the point of like adapting the novel is almost the wrong way of looking at it. As we discussed in the last part, there is a distinct
Right.
formula that all of these books follow. And I think you just got to follow that formula and you'll be fine. I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel here. I think we just have to stick to the formula. And to me, after the setup where, Bond leaves the girl, he gets the new job, these are the scenes that they should be. Either Bond is driving, Bond is romancing a woman, Bond is infiltrating the villain's crew, or Bond is killing. If a scene doesn't have one of those things in it, cut it. That's all we want from a Bond movie.
Not even, what about the old 60s movies? So there'd always be a scene where Q or someone shows them the hot new gadget. Like it'd be like we put a tape recorder inside of a satchel, and it's like a huge tape recorder. Yeah. It's like, this is genius. Like, I don't know why I'm giving them like fast-talking newsman voices when they're actually British. That was Johnny Depp, but who is actually British? Yeah, I like. Are we allowed to do a gadget scene?
Well, that I sort of consider to be part of the setup. But
okay,
yes.
Right.
I think a gadget.
It was a pretty narrow list of scenes you had there. I mean,
we've got to be clinical.
What about the liaison? Doesn't he have to meet the liaison?
That's part of him kind of infiltrating the villain's crew.
All right. That's a broad swath.
I'm cutting a broad swath. Right. But yeah, we got to get back to the basics here. You're talking about liaisons. This is Bond. But Bond should be in 95% of the film. Like, at 95% of the scenes should feature him. I also think we should start in the middle. I gave him the backstory in our last episode. We don't need to know that. We don't need to know what his sort of like history is. Bond is Bond. We know who Bond is. Let's not bog him down too much with over-explaining who this guy is. Let's just get right into it. We'll know what type of guy he is based on of his actions.
I think, history is going to repeat itself. It's going to follow the trends of the Batman films. I think the Robert Pattinson Batman film, we don't really see flashbacks to him as a kid. It just kind of starts and he's Batman. And I think the James Bond movies, like you say, they should follow suit.
Yeah, like if we need to show him, maybe early on his career, that's fine. But I don't know if it needs to be his very first job. Or
I think there actually is fertile ground to be mined in some Bond flashbacks, which have been done to death in the Batman movies. But perhaps you could have this kind of little B or C plot where we see some flashbacks to Bond's childhood. Because I don't think most moviegoers know about his parents dying in the climbing accident and dad being Scottish, mom Swedish. You kind of get the sense dad's stern, mom's soft. It would be maybe interesting to see some kind of flashbacks to this.
Oh, perhaps. Maybe if Bond's driving, romancing a woman, infiltrating the villain's crew, or killing, I could be fine with a flashback.
We didn't even really talk about the other men that are being considered for Bond. Were we going to do that at all? Do you want to just do that quickly?
We can briefly. I don't know that either of them or any of them are the quite right ones, but of course Tom Holland.
Holland's been mentioned. He, to me, familiar with franchise movies, with the Spider-Man franchise, he's a little too much of a pipsqueak, I think. I think a guy who can't, not that I'm a man for being able to grow facial hair, and he's with Zendaya and such.
Tom Holland would fold you like a pretzel.
Well, if I got a couple of real alcoholic beers in me, we'll see if he's drinking that zero stuff.
Oh, God.
Oh, no, Jim, come on. Don't attack him for that.
Not his sobriety.
Not his sobriety. But no, he's just very fresh-faced, right?
Yes.
There's a reason he keeps playing Peter Parker 4 movies in, even though he's like my age, right? He just looks very young. And I think with Bond, you need sort of more of a world weariness. The other actor they floated out is Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I've never been a huge fan of. A lot of people point to his role in Bullet Train, where he's kind of doing the British Cockney thing, and I don't know, man. He's a very good-looking guy, and he's almost too jacked. That's never really a complaint I have about dudes. I like him jacked, but I think in that case he might be a little too jacked. And then there's Harris Dickinson, who was in Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman. He's good. He's a little too Craig-like. He's got that kind of lightish, reddish, blondish hair, and I don't know. I think I think the world's clamoring for a brunette Bond again, isn't it? Time, you know, we can't do another blonde one, right? I think we gotta flip the script on that.
Yeah.
I thought we'd at least cursory mention those names.
Well,
you
I
know?
think, you mentioned all of them, and I think they all have little foibles that make them less than
Right.
perfect than
Right.
our guy Callum, who, again, I have never, ever seen do anything on film, but I know about him vaguely, and am now dead set on him
Well,
becoming
I like
the
him.
next
I
Bond.
like the name Callum Turner. It feels right. I don't know.
Fits that Lazenby, Moore, all the Turner.
Yeah,
Like
it
that's
feels
right.
right.
My boldest pitch for this would be, I think Bond makes less and less sense the further into the future that we go.
Yeah.
I would not mind seeing us make this a period piece and take us back to the 1960s and sort of a Don Draper in Mad Men, James Bond in, swinging 60s London. I can kind of like that idea.
Yeah, the producers to that would say, sure, that'd be really easy to make Tokyo look like the 60s. Yeah, let's make Dubai look like the 60s. Easy peasy. It's doable. I think it's actually a really good idea. I do think it's kind of the right tact. It's a good way to kind of reboot it, to give it a immediate implication for its visual style and sort of the tone of the performances. And we're so distanced from that era that I think you could also get away with some more like regressive elements that might be fun for audience members. If we saw it in a modern context, we might find it distasteful. But I think putting it back, there were some elements in Mad Men where it's like, boy, that's really racist, or boy, that's really sexist. But because we have the benefit of hindsight, we're like, okay, life tends to work out, and it wasn't always this bad. And, we kind of laugh at these people who are so bigoted and backwards. So I think it opens itself up to not only a lot of interesting visual style choices, but also choices in terms of the way you can approach the story.
Yeah, I think if you were to adopt it almost into like a graphic novel or something where budget was no matter, if you could just illustrate all of it, that would be my pitch for it. But I do think you're right. I think it'll probably be modern just because of the, practicality of filming things and not wanting to completely, remake the world into it being a 60s sort of version. All right, the final thing we got to talk about here is filling in the rest of this cast around Callum Turner here.
All right.
So there are 3 sort of very famous characters that are in each of the Bond movies. So we first have M, which, recently was occupied by Rafe Fine. Did I get it?
Yeah, Ray Fine. I think that's it.
Rafe Fine.
Not Ralph Fiennes.
No.
As we said for years and years.
Years and years. He was a very true to what the book had M being.
Yes.
I think there's just too much sort of lingering hangover effect from this old franchise. I think you really want to start the slate clean. I think he was a good choice for the role, but I think you need, if you want to go with a man, you need to choose somebody who's really a fixture of the British cast of stars. And so my 2, if I were to throw them out at you, I'm thinking maybe a little Colin Firth. Can I interest you in some Colin Firth?
Oscar winner, certainly a crown jewel of the British acting crown, and coincidentally won the Oscar for The King's Speech. All that talk of crown jewels. Yes, he would be wonderful. He's really good at comedies, and I think M is a perfect kind of counterbalance to the recklessness of Bond. It's sort of the Jim Gordon role in Batman, where you're sort of reacting to the crazy, ballsy main character, and there's a lot of comedy to be mined. So I really like Firth. Who else you thinking?
A great comparison. He's also got a touch of prickishness to
Yes.
him, which you definitely want. And then this, I think, was even maybe my more favorite would be Hugh Lowry.
Oh, yeah. Most people know him for playing House and for being on Veep, and I don't think too many people have heard his British accent. But again, very, very funny. Fry and Laurie, his old comedy team with Stephen Fry. Super, super funny. Really just great actor and just great kind of hangdog grizzled face, which I think, to your point about in our previous episode, what M is like in the books, I think it'd be a perfect fit.
Yeah, you can see the weight of world security on his shoulders.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Well, he was a painkiller addicted doctor for many years, so
There you go. If you wanted to take it a female route, I have a few. I don't know that any of these are right for the role, but if you were sort of to go against type, can I interest you in some Tilda Swinton?
Awesome. Love it.
Yeah,
Who's,
maybe
who else?
Emma Thompson.
Oh, awesome.
Kind of pulling up the Dame Judi Dench.
Yeah.
And then this one would be a bit more of a saucy M, Kate Winslet.
Oh yeah, dude. These are all great. I love all these.
Yeah.
I guess the thing is, will they sign on? Hugh Laurie, I almost feel like is not big enough for the role. But I think he'd be great. Colin Firth to me feels like a bullseye. Kate Winslet feels a little too big for the role. Tilda's maybe on the border.
A little off kilter.
Yeah, and
perhaps.
then Emma Thompson. I think that's like a perfect like Judi Dench successor. But all great options, man. All great options. Denis Villeneuve, I'm sure they'd want to work with him. And, it sounds like we're on board as consulting producers. So, we're the guys who came up with the idea for the Pillsbury Doughboy video game. We're no slouch pitchmen here.
We got some heat right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's, of course, M's secretary, Moneypenny.
Right.
So there are a few options here that I've got. Carrie Mulligan.
Yeah, she's pretty good. I don't know. Yeah, I guess so, because you want kind of someone who's like beleaguered and like works in the office and works with them, and she has that good kind of expression on her face. I think she'd be good. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of there's a little bit of mousy determination about her, which I think suits the role well.
Opposite Callum Turner, I think she might be a little, because Callum Turner's pretty young, so it may be there's supposed to be kind of this flirtiness.
Well,
I don't know if it'll be as believable. She seems just a little too like mature and developed in her career versus Callum Turner.
Maybe a little saucy, like naughtiness, cougar action. I think would be kind of inverting it a bit. Anyway, then I went to two other huge franchises of women we haven't seen as much in other things. I was thinking a little baby Hermione Granger, Emma Watson, and Amelia Clark, who was rendered unrecognizable because of Game of Thrones and her wig. That would be kind of interesting.
I like Amelia Clark. I don't know that Emma Watson would ever do a James Bond movie, given how like super feminist she is. Maybe she would find it too regressive. So I think Amelia Clark I could kind of see. Did you have anyone else?
I do. You were the one who actually pitched me this. We've been watching Fallout, the show, and the main female lead in that, Ella Purnell.
Yeah, I think
British. I think she's my pick for it.
She's great. She's around Callum Turner's age. Big eyes that really draw you in as a viewer. Biggest than Hollywood. Anya Taylor, thanks for having the throne for a few years.
Yeah,
but
Ana de Armas, it was lovely of you to stop by.
That's Ella Purnell's throne now.
Yeah.
I think she'd really be good. She has this kind of toughness to her that we see exhibited not only in Fallout, but she's very good in Yellow Jackets as well. So I think she'd be a really good money. But her or Amelia Clark. Float out the offer. We'll do a chemistry test with Callum, and we'll see how it goes.
And then I think there's really only one person to play Q who hasn't already. You know him maybe from the IT Crowd.
Oh,
is that it?
Yeah, Richard Iowade.
That's him.
He's awesome.
He's got the glasses. He's got the persnicketyness. He's got the humor.
Funny. He's so funny, man. If you've never seen the IT Crowd, really classic British sitcom. Kind of Seinfeld-y, just really, really funny. If you've never seen it, it's really terrific. And he's not only a great actor, really gifted filmmaker. He's made a couple of really good movies, The Double and Submarine, if you've never seen those. Terrific.
Yeah, and I'd get him in there, maybe some of the rooms. You get another sort of director on set.
Yeah, let him cut him loose, let him improvise a little. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
I think just in some of this, I did a decent amount of research for this pod. pod by reading a bunch of books and watching quite a few of the movies. And I really just got to say, good luck to everybody who is rebooting this franchise, because I really hope it goes well, because to me, there are few things better for popcorn entertainment than a really well done James Bond film.
Let's keep it an hour 50 to 2:07. Let's keep it light. Let's keep it funny. Let's keep it sexy. And, let's not take it too seriously. Let's have a good time. Let's have a good damn time.
Yeah. I had a good time. Did you have a good time, buddy?
I had a good time on this spot. And, again, Denis Villeneuve. Crap. Now I'm like
DV.
you. I can't say his name. Denis Villeneuve. We're here if you need us.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, please subscribe, comment, or leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer, Slade, Will Slade. And we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers podcast. Take care, buddy.
No, buddy. You take care.